Hi guys, tonight we walk into the hush of an Ottoman cafe, a place where steam curls like thought, and time tastes faintly of cardamom and dust. So, before you get the hang of it, like the video and subscribe. And write in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it? The night outside is slow and golden, the kind that slides softly over domes and minarets like silk. You hear the call to prayer fading into distance, leaving behind a trembling quiet, as if even the city must exhale. The lamps flicker in their brass cages. Somewhere, a spoon clicks gently against porcelain. You step inside. It's not crowded. It never is. The air feels thick, not heavy, but rich, like a thought that's been waiting a long time to be spoken. Coffee simmers behind the counter in a copper ibrick. The scent moves through you like a spell. Burnt sugar, roasted earth, and a whisper of rose water. Men in layered robes sit scattered across low stools. They talk in low voices, their words slow, deliberate, almost measured. Their hands rest on parchment. Not all are writers. Not all are officials. But somehow, everyone here is recording something, in their minds, if not in ink. And somewhere among them, unnoticed by most, are the bureaucrats, the quiet ones who keep the empire's pulse steady. You might imagine bureaucracy as something dull, gray, mechanical. But in this cafe, it feels like music, like the hum of 1,000 pens beneath the breath of history. The clerks come here after dusk, their ledgers still echoing in their minds. They sit beneath oil lamps, their faces calm and unreadable, sipping coffee that's strong enough to outlast fatigue. Sometimes they don't speak for hours. Sometimes they only nod at each other, the way musicians nod when they share a rhythm no one else can hear. You find a seat by the window. Outside, a thin mist coils over the cobblestones, where horses breathe in slow clouds. Across the street, a candle burns behind a lattice window, a silent reminder that not everyone sleeps. The waiter moves soundlessly, as if floating. His tray trembles slightly with the weight of cups. He brings your coffee, its surface swirling like a miniature storm. You take a sip. It's bitter, almost painfully so, but it awakens something. The bureaucrat beside you looks up. He's not old, but his eyes are tired, not from years, but from carefulness. He folds his hands over a scroll and smiles faintly. You ask him, perhaps without meaning to, what he writes about all day. He says, nothing important, only the empire. You laugh quietly, but he doesn't. He tells you that every cafe in this city has a twin purpose, pleasure and order. It's where merchants trade words, poets test metaphors, and officials test patience. Beneath the murmur of conversation, letters are composed, decisions are born. Empires, he says, don't only rise by sword or crown. Sometimes they rise through ink and heat, and the sound of someone quietly counting taxes in the corner. He stirs his coffee again, though it doesn't need stirring. The Sultan, he continues softly, he rules from the palace. But the rhythm of the city, it belongs to us. Outside, a cat leaps onto the windowsill and blinks at you both, eyes glimmering like ink stains. The bureaucrat strokes its fur absent-mindedly. Do you hear that? He asks. At first, you hear nothing, just the creak of a chair, the drip of water from a spout. Then you realize, it's silence, alive and watchful. The sound of men thinking. The sound of time slowing down enough to be measured. He tells you about the ledgers he keeps. Thousands of names. Thousands of lives distilled into ink and lines. Farmers, fishermen, widows, soldiers. Each one becomes a number, a column, a note in the empire's endless song. He knows none of them, yet he feels their presence every night as he writes. When I close my eyes, he murmurs, I see their lives moving like the smoke from these cups, rising, twisting, vanishing. And I wonder if anyone will remember who recorded them. You listen, and you feel it too. That faint ache between anonymity and eternity. You realize these bureaucrats, these quiet men in shadows, are like the cafe itself. Warm, necessary, invisible. Without them, nothing runs. No taxes collected, no roads maintained, no sultan informed. And yet, they leave behind almost nothing. No monuments, no poems, only the smell of coffee and ink that fades with the dawn. The bureaucrat leans closer. Sometimes, he says, I envy the poets. They write lies that last forever. We write truths that vanish tomorrow. The words hang there, fragile and bitter. You take another sip of coffee, and it tastes heavier now, as if it has absorbed the memory of his confession. A breeze slips in through the door. It carries with it the scent of rain, dust, and figs from a distant stall. Somewhere, a lute begins to play, soft, meandering, uncertain. It sounds like someone searching for a memory they can't quite reach. You look around the cafe, the shelves of glass jars filled with cardamom and cloves, the cracked walls stained with years of breath and story. Every surface seems to hum with unseen life. The tables have absorbed conversations like would absorb sunlight. The bureaucrats return to their writing. The ink glows faintly in the lamplight, the pages breathing as if alive. You imagine that, in some way, their careful notes are keeping the empire awake, preventing it from dissolving into sleep. One of them dips his quill and writes a single word that you can't quite read. It looks like a name, or maybe a prayer. The cat purrs. The rain begins. The smell of wet stone rises from the street. You close your eyes for a moment and listen to the rhythm of cups, to the turning of pages, to the invisible machinery of a civilization quietly keeping itself alive through thought and ritual. It feels ancient, eternal, and strangely familiar, like listening to your own mind at rest. And as the night deepens, you realize something. The real empire was never marble or gold. It was made of habits, of ink stains and whispered records, of tired hands balancing ledgers beneath the same stars that watched the poets and sultans. You open your eyes again. The bureaucrat is gone. His cup still steams. On the table, a single line remains written on a napkin. To remember is to rule twice. Outside, dawn is still far away, but the cafe glows with a slow, inner light, as if memory itself were burning behind the walls. And you, still holding the cup, feel like part of the archive. The night grows deeper, and the air shifts, softer now, as though the city has exhaled and settled into its long, slow rhythm. You're still in the cafe, though it feels slightly different. Maybe the lamps burn lower, or maybe the shadows have learned to speak. The line on the napkin, to remember is to rule twice, still trembles faintly in the air, as if it hasn't quite decided whether it wants to vanish or stay. A new sound joins the quiet, the faint shuffle of sandals, the sigh of parchment being unfolded. Across the room, another man sits, older, wrapped in the muted browns of a scribe's robe. His back is straight, his posture patient, like a tree that's learned endurance. You watch him for a while before realizing he's been watching you too. He gestures for you to come closer. His hands are long-fingered, stained with ink. You sit beside him. The table between you is scattered with papers covered in lines, loops, and curling Ottoman script so elegant it seems to breathe. This, he says, is the empire's heartbeat. You glance down. It looks like an account book, dull perhaps, but when you look closer, it's alive. Here are the prices of wheat and saffron, The cost of a bride's dowry in a coastal town. The number of mules that crossed the Bosporus in spring. Each figure is a story, small, exact, unpoetic. And yet, together, they build a map of existence. He dips his quill into a pot of ink, so thick it gleams like obsidian. "We don't write for glory," he says softly. "We write so that forgetting becomes impossible." The words strike something inside you. The idea that an empire could survive not through war or faith, but through memory. Through records that no one reads, but everyone depends on. Outside, the rain continues its slow conversation with the cobblestones. The sound seeps into the walls like ink through parchment. The scribe doesn't seem to notice. His quill moves with such grace it almost looks like prayer. He tells you that the bureaucracy began as a dream, a vision of perfect order. The Ottomans believed that to govern well was to mirror the divine, to make patterns that reflected the stars. Each official, each ledger, each café where they gathered, all of it part of one celestial rhythm. But perfection, he says, smiling faintly, is a slow kind of heartbreak. You ask him what he means. He looks up from the page. Because people change faster than paper does. A drop of rain lands on the sill beside you. Another, and another, until it becomes a steady whisper. The scribe covers his pages with a square of cloth to protect them. You watch the way his hands move, deliberate, calm, unhurried. The kind of calm that comes from living one life, but recording 1,000. He begins to tell you about the system itself, not as a historian would, but as someone remembering a dream. He speaks of endless scrolls, of men bent over them like monks, of how even the smallest decree traveled through invisible corridors of approval, sealed with wax, stamped with the scent of coffee and sweat. No one remembers their names, he says. Not the clerks who copied the orders. Not the couriers who rode through rain and dust to deliver them. But every word they handled changed something. A border, a tax, a fate. He pauses, listening to the rain. "We thought we were just keeping records," he whispers. "But we were building ghosts." You feel the weight of that sentence. The ghosts he means are not spirits, but echoes, fragments of moments captured in writing and never released. An empire made not only of cities and soldiers, but of paper and persistence. The lamps flicker again, their flames bowing in the draft. Somewhere behind you, a pot clinks softly, another cup being filled. The air thickens with coffee and rain. You realize you've begun to breathe in rhythm with the scribe's pen. Each stroke feels like an inhalation. Each pause, an exhale. He turns a page, and the parchment sighs. On it are names, hundreds of them, written in neat lines. Each name is followed by a number. You ask what they mean. "Debts," he says quietly, "and hopes." You wait. "Debts," he repeats, "because we all owe something, to the Sultan, to each other, to the past. And hopes, because every debt is a promise to return." He lets the quill rest. "Do you know what happens when an empire forgets its debts?" You shake your head. It forgets itself. The rain outside has turned silver in the lamplight. Through the window, you can see the narrow street glimmering like a mirror. The whole city seems to sway, its minarets rising like thoughts half-formed. In the distance, you hear a carriage wheel echo, followed by laughter, faint, feminine, from another world entirely. The scribe doesn't look up. He's already returned to his writing, his expression one of quiet devotion. You notice now that the cafe isn't quite real. The walls seem to breathe. The shelves blur slightly at the edges. It feels less like a place and more like an idea. The idea of every cafe that ever was, condensed into one eternal evening. The scribe's hand trembles for the first time. His ink blots the page, forming a small black star. He stares at it for a long moment, then whispers, "Mistakes, those are what keep the world alive." He smiles, almost to himself. The divine makes order. We make errors. That's our poetry. Something in you loosens. The thought that imperfection, even in bureaucracy, might be sacred. He closes the book. You expect him to stand, but instead he leans back and listens to the rain. The cafe has quieted. Even the cat is asleep now, curled beneath a chair. The smell of tobacco drifts faintly through the doorway, sweet and faintly burnt. "You wonder," he says suddenly, "why we meet here in Cafés." He gestures toward the steaming cups, the empty chairs, the slow drift of smoke. "Because this is where rules soften. The ink dries slower. People remember they're human before they return to the ledgers." He looks at you with a kind of tired amusement. Empires are run by people who drink coffee too slowly. You smile. The thought feels right. He rises, folds the ledger, and presses it into your hands. "Keep it," he says. "You won't be able to read it. But that's all right. What matters isn't the words. It's the weight." The cover feels warm, as if it's been absorbing stories for centuries. When you look up again, he's gone. Only his chair remains, slightly askew, with a faint imprint where he sat. Outside, the rain stops. The silence afterward is immense, not empty, but full, like the pause after a song ends and before applause begins. You realize something subtle. The bureaucrats, the scribes, the silent ones, they weren't just keeping the empire alive. They were teaching it how to remember itself gently. And you, sitting here now, holding their invisible book, have become part of that memory. The night folds itself tighter around the cafe, as if the whole city were wrapping in silk. You sit alone now, the ledger still warm beneath your hands. The air has grown thick with the perfume of damp stone, burnt sugar, and the faint metallic whisper of ink drying on the tables. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster calls too early, confused by the shimmer of lamplight against the rain-washed sky. You run your fingers over the book's cover. The leather is cracked and soft, worn smooth by hands that believed in order, or at least in the comfort of pretending it existed. You open it. The pages seem blank at first, but when you tilt them toward the light, faint lines emerge, words in Ottoman Turkish, half-faded, half-hidden. Some are too delicate to decipher, others dissolve as soon as you look. The ink has become part of the air. You can almost hear the voices of those who wrote them, measured, calm, restrained. And somewhere behind those voices, a deeper one, patient and eternal. The sound of the empire itself breathing. You begin to imagine how the cafe must have been when it first opened. The year doesn't matter. Centuries swirl together here. Picture the doorway wide and low, lanterns swinging gently above it. Steam rising from copper pots. Men entering one by one, shaking rain from their cloaks, carrying the day's weight in their shoulders. They come not only for coffee, but for permission to pause, to think, to feel human again. The bureaucrats, poets, scholars, all of them find refuge here, where time is suspended in the thin veil between dusk and dawn. In one corner, a calligrapher practices his art, turning words into gardens. The delicate curl of an olive, the proud spine of a lamb, each stroke a form of meditation. His teacher once told him, "Letters are people too. Treat them gently." And so he does. Each page he fills feels like a prayer not to God, but to memory itself. In another corner, a young clerk counts coins by candlelight, whispering names to himself as if repeating them could make them last. His father died in a distant province, unrecorded, unremarked. So the boy writes his name at the bottom of every list. tiny, hidden in the margin. An invisible act of defiance. A quiet way of saying, you existed. You close your eyes and breathe. The air smells of roasted beans and damp parchment, of humanity distilled into patience. Outside, the Bosporus must be turning dark blue, its surface smooth as glass. Ships creak in the distance. Seagulls cry once, twice, then vanish into the fog. The Ottoman capital never really sleeps. But it dreams, always. And in those dreams, the bureaucrats move like shadows through corridors of paper and smoke. One of them, perhaps the man whose book you now hold, walks beneath the flicker of lamps toward a small office near the harbor. He unlocks the door, lights a single candle, and unrolls a decree from the palace. The seal is bright and red, the script sharp and merciless. He is to record new taxes on imported tobacco. He sighs, not from anger, but from fatigue, because he knows what this means. Longer lists, longer hours, more ink, more silence. But still he writes, because that is his duty. And somewhere, in the act of writing, he finds peace. To bring form to chaos, that is its own kind of prayer. You turn another page in the ledger. There, a sketch, faint but clear. Someone has drawn the outline of a coffee pot, and beside it, a line of text. The world is bitter, but so is truth. You trace it with your fingertip. The words hum faintly beneath your skin. Across the cafe, a new figure enters, wrapped in a traveling cloak, the hem damp from rain. He doesn't remove it. He sits opposite you, orders coffee with a nod, and studies you with quiet curiosity. His eyes are dark, alert, alive in a way that feels centuries old. You're holding one of our ledgers, he says softly. His voice carries an accent you can't place, somewhere between now and forever. You nod. He leans closer. Do you know what you're reading? You admit you don't. It's not a record, he says. Not anymore. It's a dream pretending to be order. He smiles, and the smile feels like a memory you once had. The empire built cafés because it feared silence, he continues. It needed places where men could speak without speaking, where thoughts could settle like dust. That's why we drank so much coffee. It wasn't for wakefulness. It was for remembering. You watch the steam rise from his cup. It curls in the air like handwriting, forming invisible words that dissolve before they can be read. He tells you about the old bureaucratic rituals, how officials were trained to write with measured breath, to keep the quill moving like the pulse, to make no sudden movements, to let the pen decide what mattered. Most people think bureaucracy kills the soul, he says, his voice low. But for us, it preserved it. Each document was a mirror of who we were and who we pretended to be. He laughs softly. And the cafés. Oh, the cafés were our confession booths. He explains that every cafe had its character. Some were for poets, where arguments about metaphors lasted longer than empires. Others were for merchants, where fortunes shifted in whispers. But the bureaucrats' cafés, they were different. No drama, no debate, just the gentle hum of duty, the comfort of repetition, the slow rhythm of something eternal. He looks around, his eyes half lit by the lamp. We called them the empire's lungs, because here, the state learned how to breathe. Outside, thunder rolls, not angry, just distant, like the sound of someone rearranging furniture in the heavens. The storm is moving closer. The man sets his cup down and says, when the empire began to crumble, it wasn't the palaces that fell first. It was the cafés, the places where we remembered how to stay still. You ask what happened. He shrugs gently. The air changed. The ink dried too fast. People stopped writing for memory and started writing for power. The candle between you gutters once, twice. When it steadies again, the man is gone. Only his cup remains, untouched, still steaming. You close the ledger slowly. The sound of rain returns, mingled now with the faint smell of smoke, as if somewhere, beyond these walls, paper is burning. Maybe it's just a chimney. Maybe not. You look around. The cafe seems emptier. The shelves bare. The voices that once filled it now drift like ghosts through the corners. You realize you're not simply visiting a place. You're wandering through its memory, through the echo of every bureaucrat who ever sat here, whispering to himself that his ink might outlast him. And for a moment, a small, shimmering moment, you believe it will. The storm finally arrives. It begins not with thunder, but with breath, the soft exhale of wine through the latticed window, stirring the candle flame beside you. A low hum passes through the city, through the cobblestones and chimneys and sleeping domes. Rain begins to fall, slow and precise, each drop sounding like the tick of a clock that never runs out of time. You sit in the cafe and listen. The street outside has turned to liquid bronze beneath the lamps. The scent of wet stone and roasted beans blends with something else now. Something older, the faint perfume of parchment curling at the edges. You realize the ledger is still open before you, but it's no longer blank. New lines appear as if written by invisible hands, one after another, impatient strokes of fading ink. You lean closer. They describe not numbers or taxes, but moments. A clerk sighs in his sleep, dreaming of a childhood orchard. A cat crosses a courtyard at dawn. A candle burns too quickly during the night shift. The empire, it seems, was recording itself, not through laws, but through the smallness of being alive. A drop of water lands on the page and spreads into a soft blur, erasing one of the lines. You wonder if that's how history truly ends, not in conquest or fire, but in the slow dissolving of ink. The rain thickens, drumming against the awning. Through the misted window, you can see a man walking, shoulders hunched, his robe soaked. He pushes open the cafe door and steps in with a bow of apology. The smell of rain comes in with him, cool and clean. He shakes off his sleeves and joins you, smiling faintly as if he's been here before, as if this table has always been waiting. He places a small, tin-bound notebook on the table. "I used to work across the street," he says. "Customs office. Endless lists. Endless ships." His voice is soft, blurred around the edges like the rain outside. You can tell he's tired, not just from the weather, but from the weight of too many memories stacked like ledgers in his mind. He opens the notebook and shows you a page, filled with elegant handwriting, then abruptly crossed out halfway through. "I was supposed to track every cargo that entered the harbor," he says. "Cloves, silk, sugar, coffee beans, copper pots. Every grain counted, every crate taxed. But sometimes," he smiles a little wistful, "sometimes I wrote poems between the columns." You lean closer. Beneath a line about tobacco tariffs, he's written, "The ships arrive, but the souls remain at sea." You look up. His eyes glimmer with something quiet, something fragile. "I think we all did it," he murmurs. A few words here and there, hidden between transactions. "Our rebellion was small, but it was ours." He laughs softly, shaking his head. "We thought we were saving beauty from the boredom of order. But maybe the opposite happened. Maybe we gave order a kind of beauty." He closes the notebook and lays his hand on it gently, as though soothing a sleeping animal. "When the empire fell," he says, "the records were scattered. Some burned, some drowned, some were sold as scrap. But I like to think a few survived, because they wanted to." You watch him for a while. The storm softens. The candle flickers lower. His words seem to linger, woven into the smoke, curling toward the ceiling. You ask him if he misses the empire. He smiles, slow and sad. No one ever misses the empire. They miss its rhythm. He leans back in his chair. You see, bureaucracy was never about control. It was about continuity. It was the lullaby of civilization, the same song, sung every day, so people could sleep knowing tomorrow would sound familiar. He looks at his cup, almost empty now. But all lullabies end, even the best ones. Outside, the thunder rolls again, softer now, like the heartbeat of something vast and distant. The rain begins to fade. The world exhales. You close your eyes for a moment. The sound of dripping water blends with the gentle scratching of quills that no longer exist. The murmurs of voices that belonged to men long turned to dust. And yet, you can still feel them here, in the way the room seems to glow from within, in the calm rhythm of your breath, in the soft, ghostly scent of ink that never dries. When you open your eyes, the man is gone. His notebook remains. You open it again, and now the lines have changed. Every empire is a cup of coffee left half finished, still warm, still waiting. The words feel like a sigh, a benediction. You close the cover and sit quietly as the last of the rain trickles down the window pane. You think about the endless records, the files, the lists, the ledgers, the invisible stories folded inside them. About how these bureaucrats, patient, weary, unseen, might have felt when they realized that no one would ever thank them. And yet, they worked. They returned every morning, ink-stained and calm. Perhaps that was their strength, to care deeply for something that would never know their names. The candle has almost burned out. Its light trembles on the wall like a dying heartbeat. You reach out and place your hand beside it, feeling the faint warmth. You whisper to the empty room, "Does anyone still write like that?" The silence answers, soft, endless. A door creaks somewhere. The air shifts again. The scent of cardamom returns, as if memory itself has opened the door. You realize then that the cafe has no exit. It was never a place you entered. It was a place that entered you. And now it lives there, somewhere between your heartbeat and your next breath, where all forgotten things go to rest. Outside, the first thin light of dawn begins to slip down the walls. The lamps flicker out one by one. The city begins to wake. You take a final sip of your coffee, cold now, but comforting. The taste of night still lingers. Somewhere far away, a clerk opens a new book, dips his quill in ink, and begins again. The dawn doesn't rush. It arrives slowly, almost shyly, a pale breath of light touching the edges of the cafe, softening the gold into gray, the gray into quiet. The storm has passed, leaving the air washed clean and faintly sweet, like paper after the rain. The coffee pot still smolders in the corner, whispering the last sighs of heat. The steam rises lazily and disappears into the ceiling. You can smell the burnt sugar again, the ghost of cardamom, the faint metallic echo of ink. The city outside is waking. You can hear it, the faint creak of cart wheels, the splash of water tossed from a doorway, the muffled call of a vendor who has yet to see the sun. But inside, everything is still. The cafe, the cups, the ledgers, all seem to linger in that fragile moment between sleep and memory. You look down at the table. The notebook, the ledger, the napkin, all the relics of the night, have vanished. Only a faint ring from your cup remains, a perfect brown circle on the wood, the mark of presence, the proof of something that was real, and yet not quite. You exhale slowly. A faint warmth still hums in the air, as if the voices of the bureaucrats have settled just beyond hearing. Men who counted and recorded and preserved, not because they believed history would remember them, but because someone had to. You begin to wonder what it meant to live that way, to dedicate a life to preserving the smallest truths, to know that your handwriting might outlast you, but your name would not. Outside, the light grows stronger. Through the window, the domes of the city gleam faintly, still damp from rain. Because maybe everything, even forgetting, has its place in the design. A cat appears again, the same one from before, or its memory. It leaps onto the windowsill, stretches, and stares out toward the waking street. You reach to pet it, but your hand passes through light. The cat blinks, slow and knowing. Then it fades like steam. The air trembles once more, a faint vibration, like the last note of a distant song. You can almost hear the bureaucrats again, their pens scratching, their cups clinking, their sighs blending with the hum of the world. And then, as if the cafe itself is exhaling, the sound fades. The room begins to dissolve. The shelves, the lamps, the walls, all turning into mist. The smell of coffee lingers a little longer, sweet and smoky, until even that begins to thin. You find yourself standing in the early light, alone. The street is empty, washed clean by rain. Somewhere far away, a bell rings. You take a breath, long, calm, steady. And in that breath, the empire still exists. Maybe it never ended. Maybe it simply moved into the rhythm of a morning routine, into the pulse of someone quietly doing their work, into the slow patience of those who believe that small things matter. You walk away from the cafe. The cobblestones glisten beneath your feet. The air smells of wet figs and old paper. Somewhere, a cup is being filled again. And as you turn the corner, the light spills across your face, soft, forgiving, eternal. Everything that once seemed eternal turns to ash. And perhaps there is peace in this, because even ash remembers the shape of fire. And somewhere, deep in the silence, the cafe falls asleep with you.